little button. That says finish.
Okay, I'll just touch that.
Once we're done.
Enjoy, my dear.
Hi, I'm Cassie Anderson. I'm the Master Gardener Coordinator in Adams County, and I am here today to talk to you about repotting a lemon tree. A lot of you might have citrus trees or other small fruit trees in a pot in your house, and a lot of times it's really easy for these to get pot bound and kind of forget about them and let them languish for a little while. This particular one we inherited actually when we bought the property, and it's probably been in this pot for at least 10 years. So today we're going to try and get it repotted into a nice pot that's a little bit bigger and let it have some space for its roots to grow. So today I have the original pot tree in its pot. This is a terracotta pot. Another reason that it's important to repot when it's something like terracotta. You can see here the terracotta is literally disintegrating, and so in not very long it's going to start falling apart. And terracotta is a good choice for a pot, but I decided to switch it up, and I'm going with a nice plastic pot this time. I did drill holes in the bottom so that we get good drainage. If you buy any pot, whether it's ceramic or plastic or anything like that, it's really important that you have good drainage of your pot so that you make sure that you're not just having standing water in the bottom. Roots need a lot of air in order to do their metabolic functions effectively, and so if you don't have good drainage, then you're more likely to just have standing water in the bottom of the pot. Another important thing to note, there's no benefit to having rocks or anything in the bottom of your pot. All you're doing is reducing your soil volume. If you have a huge decorative pot and you're trying to reduce your soil volume, you can put other materials in to reduce how much soil you're putting in, but for the purpose of improving drainage, it's not beneficial to put something like large rocks in the bottom. There's a lot of really cool YouTube videos you can watch, and you can actually see that for any change in soil substrate, you actually have to completely saturate the texture above in order for water to move into the texture below, even if you're going from small texture to large texture, like with potting soil to a rock. And so it's really important when you're starting a new pot, you don't need to add something in for drainage. You can put something like a coffee filter or some kind of thin material in to keep soil from going through your holes if you choose to. It's not completely necessary. I know a lot of folks who just use those like small screens, or they just use coffee filters for smaller pots. Any of that is perfectly fine. It's kind of up to you and what your preferences are. So for today, I've got my nice big level of potting soil. I've already moistened this potting soil. A lot of times when you're buying potting soil, it comes and it's really dry. So I actually pre-moistened this because sometimes when it gets really dry, it actually becomes hydrophobic. It becomes really hard to wet it. And so if you put it in dry and then try and put water in on the top, it's not going to saturate and it's not going to wet those roots as well as you might want it to. So pre-wetting it in a separate container like this can be a really good way to go. You want it to be moist enough that this one, it's a little drier than I'd really like, but you want it, there we go. You want it to be able to kind of hold together if you squeeze it, but you don't want it to be so wet that if you squeeze it, water drips out. So kind of where this is this nice crummy, and that's crummy with a B, level, it can be a really nice way to do it. So having it pre-moistened in a separate container can be a really good way to go. So I'm not sure what to expect from this tree. Like I said, I inherited it, I never planted it, so we are going to do a little bit of an experiment. I do have my handy pruners. If I pull it out and I find any roots that are problematic, I'm planning to try and trim some of those roots to help encourage outward growth to the edge of the pot. So I'm going to scooch my soil and my pot over so that I can pull this guy out. Voila, there's our tree. So I am actually going to take some of this soil off. This guy has very little roots for as big of a tree as it is. I suspect if I clean all of this off, I'm going to see quite a bit of circling roots. Hopefully, this does seem like a pretty scary process, but if you can find roots that are like this guy, bending inward, trimming that so that it will start to grow outward is going to be beneficial. A lot of these roots aren't too bad, but if we can kind of encourage some outward growth, this process is called bare rooting. A lot of times it's encouraged to do this for fruit trees and for important trees, or trees that you're planting outside, but it can be just as important to do it for trees that you're planting inside. Alright, so actually isn't as bad as I thought it would be. There's just not a lot of growth, which is kind of surprising to me because this tree has been growing pretty decently for a long time. So I really thought I would see some more circling in here. Hopefully this replanting is going to be a really good thing for this tree. Alright, I do have my buckets of water over here. I'm going to grab one. And while I'm getting the soil ready, I didn't have to do nearly as much pruning on it as I thought. Although actually that little root I am going to prune because it's growing straight down. Roots that are growing straight down or straight up are usually not going to be the best for the health of the tree. If you prune them, it's going to release buds that were dormant and encourage new growth. So that can be a beneficial thing to do. So I'm going to dunk this entire guy into my handy bucket of water that I've got right here, and then kind of prepare myself to plant into this new container, figuring out where I want everything to best show what I'm doing. So since it's a fairly deep root system, I want to make sure that I've got a lot of good room for the roots itself to grow. So I'm going to kind of have a little bit of potting soil up around the edges. Now a note on the type of potting soil. There's a couple different names that you might see when you go to the garden center. You might see potting soil, you might see garden soil. When you're dealing with a container plant, you really want to be using potting soil. Potting soil is completely soil-less. It's all organic material, and it has a lot better porosity, a lot better air movement in the media. Garden soil sometimes can have mineral components in it, which is going to be a lot heavier. It's designed to be put in your garden outside, so it's not a good choice for a container plant. So this guy's been soaking for a minute or so. Hopefully it will be good to go. That actually is a pretty good looking root system. It's just smaller than I expected it to be. So this is a good way to kind of help speed along the bare rooting process using a bucket of water. I've done this when I've transplanted some of my fruit trees outside as well. It can be a little bit of a process, but it can be worth doing. All right, so I'm testing this out, and this is really deep. I actually want this to be about up here, so I'm actually going to put this guy back into the water. It's nice to have a bucket of water that you can kind of just set things into. And then I am going to put, whoops, a little bit more soil into my pot. This is why I put a tarp down, because sometimes transplanting can get messy. All right, let's see if that works a little better. Oh yes, that's getting us. Now, you don't need your plant to be all the way up at the soil surface. I'm kind of aiming for this little lip that's in here, having it kind of even with this little lip. And you don't want it to be planted deeply. This is going to be the same principle when you're planting a tree outside. You want to plant with that root flare. So this is about a good depth, and I'm just going to start filling in potting soil around here. Kind of filling those roots in and snugging it in. And it's just balanced enough that I can leave it be and start filling in around it as well. I really thought that we were going to have a lot more pruning and issues that I would have to talk about. This wasn't as messy of a root structure as I was expecting. But it's going to be kind of satisfying to have this in a nice fresh pot and good growth. I am using gardening gloves working with this potting soil. There are some issues with various nasties in our potting soil, so it can be usually a good idea if you're working with potting soil to wear gloves. But once you've got it planted up, you should be just fine. Get the rest of this potting soil in here. Bottom of it when I got a little bit wetter when I was getting it all wetted up to prepare for this. There we go. Okay. And that's just about perfect, just about where I wanted it to end up height-wise. Since potting media is all organic material, over time it will break down, and so you will need to top it up or repot or replace the potting media. If you're growing in containers with annual plants, then you do want to replace that potting media every year for vegetable products. And if you're doing vegetables, then you can then transition that media to annuals or your perennials that are in containers as well. If you guys have other questions, you can definitely pop them in. Oh, there are questions? Let me grab the camera and I will take a look at what those questions are and see if I can address them. All right. So Lynn says, is any potting soil fine? There are different qualities of potting soils. You want to just make sure that you're finding one that has finer size particles and doesn't have really coarse materials. Those really coarse materials, they will increase the porosity, but they also make they're not as good for root growth. And Carrie says, is this an indoor tree? Yes, this is a lemon tree that I've had for about 7 years. I inherited it from the previous owners, so I don't really know what species or cultivar it is, but it definitely needed a little bit of help and love. Where will I winter this tree? This definitely winters inside, ideally under a grow light. Typically, grow lights are going to give you much better growth, especially for our citrus trees, because they really they tend to bloom and fruit starting in the winter, and so extra light on them is going to be very beneficial. This particular guy, you can see the shiny on here. I definitely had a mealybug infestation this year, so I'm happy I can almost get it outside. It's actually going to go back in for tonight because we're expecting a bit of a freeze, but it's going to be out here pretty soon because they're a lot happier when they get a lot of light. Are there any other questions for now? Otherwise, that is our demonstration for today. And if you have other thoughts or questions, definitely shoot us an email or send us a message on Facebook and we can help you out with your yard and garden needs. All right. Thank you guys so much. I'll be checking in on the comments a few times after today, and I will also repost this with captions later this week. Thank you guys so much and have a wonderful day. Enjoy your gardening.